Okay, so for most people plugged into the world of nutrition, the name Dr. Michael Mosley is well known. Before entering medicine, he studied philosophy, politics, and economics at New College, Oxford. After a short time in psychiatry, he began working for the BBC, going on to produce a number of different science programs, including Blood and Guts, The Human Face, 10 Things You Need to Know About Losing Weight, amongst many others. He's perhaps best well known for popularizing the 5-2 diet based on his friend Dr. Walter Longo's research. In 2013, he published The Fast Diet, and in 2019, a book called The Fast 800. Our discussion today will be wide-ranging, but will be structured around his recent books about weight loss. Dr. Mosley, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I guess we can start with your own personal journey. Your journey towards health has been a really interesting one. At one point, you were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. There must have been some dark moments there and justifiable concerns about the pathway forward. I know this will resonate with many of our viewers. Can you talk a little about how you managed to turn things around?
Sure. So it was actually in 2012, and I went to see my GP about something unrelated. She said, let's do a blood test. We haven't sort of looked at that for a while. She did that, and then she rang me up later to say, look, your blood sugars are really actually very high. Had repeat tests, and she said, look, I'm afraid you have type 2 diabetes, and I think you should start on medication. We'll start on metformin, see how that goes. And that's sort of standard approach. And I wasn't keen because my father had developed diabetes at around the same age. I'm now 64, so this was about 8 years ago. So I was in my sort of mid-50s, and it's about the same age my dad had developed type 2 diabetes. And he had followed all the sort of medical advice, but his diabetes got worse and worse, more and more medication, and he ended up dying at the age of 74 of complications, including heart failure and early signs of dementia. So I thought that's not really a road I want to go down.
Yes.
And I persuaded the BBC to let me make a documentary called Eat Fast, Live Longer, in which I would see if I could cure myself of type 2 diabetes, which was regarded at the time as an impossible dream. And I was going to do it through something called intermittent fasting. So I went off to the US and I spoke to a lot of leading researchers like Walter Longo at the University of Southern California and Professor Mark Mattson at the National Institutes on Aging. And I tried different forms of intermittent fasting and settled on what I call the 5-2 method, where I cut my calories 2 days a week. And came back and I did that for 8 weeks while they were editing the film. And at the end of that time, my blood sugars, I'd lost about 9 kilos and my blood sugars returned to normal, where they have stayed ever since. So the program went out in August 2012, and I later wrote a book called The Fast Diet. And that really kind of triggered a huge amount of interest in the whole area of intermittent fasting, which previously had been seen as something strictly for the hippies. It was kind of woo-woo stuff. But I was actually bringing serious science into it. And in that book, actually, I wrote about 5-2, but I also wrote about alternate day fasting, and also something which has become hugely popular, which is time-restricted eating, where the idea is sometimes known as 16-8 or 14-10, where you cut the hours within which you eat. And I basically laid out the science where it was at that time. And I sort of assumed, you write these books, you make these programs, you go on and do something else. So I assumed that would be over and done with. But actually, it just triggered a vast interest in the subject. And I was also curious as to why I'd managed to reverse my diabetes. As I said, it was regarded as impossible. So what had happened? And that led me on to doing other things, including writing the Fast 800, which is about rapid weight loss, but which I'm told is been the most popular diet book in Australia and New Zealand since it was published a couple of years ago. So
that's really, yes, yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, it must have been a big surprise to you as well as everybody else. I mean, when you first started on that journey, in your wildest dreams, do you think you'd have such great success and so soon?
Not at all. At the end of the program, I did say, look, I think this is beginning of a revolution of something that is very significant, but I didn't imagine for a moment that it would take off in the way it did. And I did also wonder whether the expression 5-2 was a bit odd, but for some reason that also caught on. And I think one of the things that really helped was the fact that there were some very eminent scientists behind it. At the time, a lot of the research was in animals, but since then, it has triggered a lot of scientific research in Australia, New Zealand, the States, the
Mm,
UK, all over the world. And people have got hugely interested in intermittent fasting
mm,
and the impact, not just on weight loss, but on the brain. And
mm,
indeed, Professor Mark Matson, who was one of my sort of gurus in this, the
mm,
guy from the National Institutes on Aging, he's
mm,
one of the world's foremost neuroscientists. And his primary interest in intermittent fasting was uh, on the brain, on seeing if it is possible to delay the onset of dementia and things like that, because his
yes.
dad also developed dementia, but he's particularly interested in obviously diseases of the brain, including Parkinson's and things like that. And so he's published hundreds and hundreds of papers on the impact of intermittent fasting on the brain and
Yeah,
continues to do
that's an
so.
interesting point you raised there. I've seen in the scientific literature that dementia-related diseases has been referred to as diabetes type 3. Yeah, it's fascinating you should say that. I mean, looking at you physically now, you look like terrific, and there are objective and subjective measures of success. Physically, you're obviously a much improved version of yourself. But what about the subjective measures that people don't think about when they think about losing weight? It's all about how they look and image. But what about things such as your energy, your mental acuity, your mood, what might loosely be described as vitality? How could you describe your difference in your life now to what it was back in those dark days?
Absolutely. It was very sluggish. And to be honest, also in the intervening 8 years, had I continued on the trajectory I was on at the time, I would be a much fatter and sicker version of the person you see in front of you now, because my dad really did start to decline fairly quickly, although he was on medication. The medication alone was not enough. It's a bit like, taking some form of aspirin or something like that to bring down a fever without dealing with the underlying cause. And the underlying cause in type 2 diabetes and in many chronic conditions is the fat you're carrying around in your tummy, which is kind of then going into your liver and your other organs. And unless you get rid of that, the danger is that all you're doing with the medication is you're just covering up the symptoms. So, absolutely, I do feel a lot more energetic. I also sleep better
Mm,
because back in 2012, I was snoring really, really loudly. I mean, really
mm,
loudly. You
yes,
could hear me on
yes.
the other side of the house. And my wife said, I used to live opposite a pub. And they delivered beer barrels in the morning, bang, bang, bang. And she
Mm.
said I was so loud I would drown out the beer barrels. So, yeah. And when I lost the weight, I lost the inches around the neck. So for
Yeah.
every kilo you lose approximately a centimeter around your waist, and along with the stuff around your waist, you lose it around your neck. And so I just stopped snoring. Certain point, click. No more snoring, and much more peaceful nights for me, and also for Claire, and indeed, the
Yes.
neighbours.
Yes,
So
it's nice to know that an unintended beneficial consequence has been your wife's sleep. You've managed to turn your health around, but sad to say, so many haven't. Like obesity has doubled across the world since 1980. In the UK, nearly two-thirds of men and women are overweight or obese. Australia is the same. The US even worse. Clearly, the general consensus about what constitutes a healthy diet has been badly misguided. There are many factors at play. What are your thoughts about how this has happened?
I think the primary thing is the rise of ultra processed foods. So that something like 70% of the Australian diet, certainly, and in the UK, is made up of what are described as ultra processed. Now, foods, there is, if you like, things like nuts and berries and vegetables, which are kind of food as we know it. Then there's processed food, which are things like yogurt and milk. They've been through a process. And then there's ultra processed, which is the stuff you buy in shiny packages in the supermarket, which have 15 ingredients down the side, or when you go out and eat fast food. And it's the ultra processed food which seems to be the problem, because it owes more to the petrochemical industry than it does to anything else. And these sort of foods are foods that we have never encountered. We did not evolve to deal with. And they've also been carefully engineered by the food industry so that you will eat more and more and more of them. They come in a particular ratio of fats to carbs, 2 to 1 broadly. If you look at the most, if you like, addictive foods on the planet, at least as measured by the Yale Food Addiction Scale, right at the top. What do you think is right at the top of the most addictive thing? what would you imagine?
Oh, well, it's got to be sugar based, right? But the magic ratio you're
Sugar-based?
talking about is 2 parts fat, 1 part sugar, right?
Yep, it is. Chocolate. Chocolate is
Mhm.
number one. And then up there is also pizza. You don't think of pizza as particularly sugary, but it's got that ratio of carbs to sugar, what we call crisps, and I think you call chips.
Mhm.
Basically, all that stuff is up there. And once you start eating it, you just want to eat more and more of it. With me, chocolate, particularly milk chocolate, I have a square, I have another square. Some
Mhm.
people can put it aside. My wife can put it aside, forget about it. It
Mhm.
haunts me. I go back and
Mhm.
I look for it and I eat more and more. Packet of crisps, I start.
Mhm. Yeah,
I do
yeah.
not stop. Right at the bottom of the Yale food addiction score is broccoli. So you
Mm.
have, unfortunately, the vegetables and the things
Yes.
which are good for you, which, to be honest, most of us are not addicted to.
Mm.
And then there are things which we cannot stop eating, which are at the top. And it's very like cigarettes, that these foods, these ultra processed foods, have been promoted in much the same way.
Mm.
And I think that is the primary problem. We've seen the
Mm.
rise and rise of those, that we've forgotten how to cook. They are convenience foods. They are everywhere. They are in your face. They are heavily promoted,
Mm.
and they bypass all the normal processes which would encourage you to stop eating.
Yeah, and the
So
salient point there is that this hasn't happened by accident, it's by design. There was a book called The Dorito Effect by Mark Schatzker that explains how large food corporations spend enormous amounts of money making products that are highly addictive, non-satiative, devoid of nutrients, yet exploding with this artificially enhanced flavor that you're talking about, not to mention the magical 2-to-1 ratio. And they're designed to hijack your brain, and that seems to be what the situation we've got ourselves into. So, I mean, there's certain core fundamentals that any thinking person wants to focus on if they want to lose weight. Number one, it seems to me that we need to make a distinction between real food and edible food-like substances, to use Michael Pollan's memorable phrase.
yeah,
Right. So, like you're saying, since World War II and dramatically since 1980, the way we nourish ourselves has changed radically via the mass production of this heavily processed food. That is the major contributor you feel to the obesity and
oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. And unfortunately, the trend is still upwards, that people are trying to go back, but a lot of the skills have been lost. So a lot of people, there are a lot more cooking shows on the television, but a lot less people actually cooking. And we see fast food as kind of something which is cheap and easy, but it's cheap because the ingredients are cheap. They tend to be low quality, poor quality protein. And what happens again, one of the things, not only are these foods really very addictive, you eat more and more of them, you stop feeling satiated, they're very low in fiber. So after a couple of hours of having your burger, you want to go and have another burger. But they're also very low in good quality protein, in nutrients. So what happens is your body goes, hey, I want some real food. I don't want this stuff. So it goes out looking for more and more stuff to eat. And unfortunately, what it finds is more and more ultra processed foods. So I do see that as the primary problem. There are other things which have gone wrong with society as well. We have become more sedentary, but I think that is the main thing. And it's how you kind of, once you've gone into the process, once you've started to put on weight, once the weight has started to, pile on around the gut, then this starts a whole horrible process. You sleep badly. When you sleep badly, then what you crave is junky, carby rich food the next morning. On average, people eat around 400 calories more the day after a poor night's sleep. So the thing you want is, you want biscuits, you want crisps, you want cake, you want something to make yourself feel a bit better after a bad night's sleep. And so you eat them, and then you're part of this vicious cycle. So you have to kind of break into it. And critically, you have to learn how to cook, what to eat, and how to get back to real foods, because otherwise you're just going to be on this horrible vicious cycle.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, one of the mantras I use is if it doesn't rot, don't eat it, and then be suspicious of barcodes, right? Yeah. So if something comes with a barcode on it, with very few exceptions, chances are that the maker of that food hasn't got your health as a top priority. There's no doubt.
Absolutely. I mean,
Uh,
one of my other rules is never ever eat something you can buy in a petrol station, because it's very simple.
Indeed.
This stuff
Indeed.
is been sitting on the shelf there for many, 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 many months. And
Yeah,
the reason
yeah.
it can do so is because, it's not some food. I do like that one. Yeah, don't eat something which can't rot.
Yeah, yeah. It's an edible substance, right? It's not necessarily food. Right. Yeah. I mean, following the science has always been a mantra of yours, and any thinking person would agree. But not all studies are the same. And a lot of the questions that my clients gave to me to ask to you that they find very confusing have to do with deciphering media reports about observational studies as opposed to hard data from randomized clinical trials. They're very different things. Correlation is not causation, as they say. A classic case or a classic example is red meat is often correlated with early death. It's quite disingenuous to say that for many reasons. But can you elaborate on why randomized clinical trials are the gold standard for evidence and how observational studies are not designed to show causation? And how does the average person decipher which studies contain findings worth reading?
Sure. So there are different levels of evidence. Probably down at the bottom is animal studies, particularly rat studies, because rats are not like humans. It's a good starting point. You can understand the basic mechanisms, but they're not very convincing. Then you have these observational studies, and they can be very big. So some of them can have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people in them. And obviously big numbers is better than small numbers. So it's better to have a big study rather than something which involves 5 people. But the problem with observational studies, for example, there was a study a while ago suggesting that eating soya, if you're a man, would cut your risk of prostate cancer. And indeed, it turned out that the men in the group who were eating more soya were less likely to get prostate cancer. But there were many confounding variables. For example, the people who were eating soya were also much more health conscious. They did more exercise, they drank less alcohol, and they ate a lot more fiber in their food. So there were a lot of other things going on. And when they actually did a randomized controlled trial, it made no difference at all. And what you do with a randomized controlled trial, obviously, is you take ideally a reasonably large group of people. You break them down into 2 groups. You don't offer them a choice. Essentially, you basically say, you're in this group, you're in this group, and then we're going to kind of follow you over time. You look back at the groups to make sure that they are similar, that you haven't by accident, divided the smokers into one group and the non-smokers into another group. And then you follow them to see what happens with your intervention. And that is why the randomized controlled trial is the gold standard, if you like. Ideally, you want a randomized controlled trial which is also blinded, so that neither the researchers nor the subjects know. This is pretty well impossible in any food-related trial, because obviously you kind of do know. But for example, a brilliant example of a randomized controlled trial which was done a while ago was around rapid weight loss for people with type 2 diabetes. This was done by a guy called Professor Roy Taylor in the UK. And prior to that, there were 2 assumptions. One is that type 2 diabetes is an irreversible disease. And secondly, that rapid weight loss diets are a terrible way to go. So he had done a number of smaller trials suggesting that rapid weight loss could lead to reversal of type 2 diabetes in a significant number of people. So he managed to persuade a charity called Diabetes UK to fund the trial. These things were expensive. It cost about 6 million quid. That's about $10 million. And it took him about 4 years. But he took around 198 people, randomly allocated them to either standard approach or to rapid weight loss, 800 calories a day, every day, for around 12 weeks. And they had to do that 12 weeks. And then he followed the 2 groups of people over time. Now, the group who did the rapid weight loss, they lost an average of around 10 kilos. He followed them for a year. They kept the 10 kilos off, and they began to dramatically reduce the amount of medication. So around half of them were able to come off all medication. All of them were able to reduce their medication. Whereas the group receiving standard care, they basically became sicker and sicker. He's now been following them for 3 years. The group who initially had the rapid weight loss, they are much, much healthier. They are on half the medication, whereas this group who are getting the standard care, they've had, I think, 5 cancers, 1 death, 2 strokes. They're basically getting sicker and sicker. So for me, it's very powerful because I'm seeing what could have happened to me. If I hadn't done the rapid weight loss, if I hadn't lost weight, I could be with this group here, who, despite being on best available care, are getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So since then, other people have replicated it, because with a randomized controlled trial, you want other people to do it. preferably in other countries.
Mm-hmm.
So Roy Taylor's done it, a group in Oxford have done it, a group in Sydney are doing it at the moment, a group in Qatar did it, and they got even better results. They did it with younger people. They saw 14 kilos, and 70% of people were able to come off all medication. So what you got there is a proper randomized controlled trial. Even so, I get into arguments with dietitians and people who say, that this is just a temporary thing, that rapid weight loss is a terrible thing to do, that it's dangerous, that you should stick with the slow and steady. And I'm going, well, that's not what the evidence shows. The reason you do randomized controlled trials is to prove something. And once you've proven it, you get somebody else to do it, and they do it, and then somebody else does it. And if they all consistently come up with the same thing, you're in a position where you can go, well, reasonably, I think we can say that the old paradigm is wrong, that type 2 diabetes is reversible, and that this is the best way to do it. And indeed, the UK government was so convinced that they're now rolling out this program in 5,000 people. And that's why I wrote, the fast diet. It was based largely on Roy Taylor's work, but other people's work as well. And that's because I wanted to say, look, this is what the evidence is. And doctors have now embraced it. I still get a lot of pushback because there are still a lot of people who simply won't believe it, or who are unaware of the research.
Part of the problem, is it not, is that a lot of health professionals, doctors, researchers have staked their whole professional careers saying something to the contrary. So it's very hard for them to do that. And we come into this idea of confirmation bias and the misinformation that can come to that, and the ability of people to hoodwink themselves. It's a big problem. I mean, one thing that I've seen is the avalanche of misinformation about the role of fat in the human diet over the past 50 years. I mean, we go back to Dr. Ansel Keys' questionable ethics in his 7-country study. We look at the shocking revelations published recently in the New York Times about the sugar industry paying off Harvard scientists to bury damaging revelations about sugar's role in heart disease, instead falsely blaming fat. It appears to me that fat itself has gotten a really bad rap. What is your position of the role of fat in the human diet, and has this position evolved over time?
It has, but I was, when I was at medical school, we got almost no training in nutrition. So I came out basically saying low fat this, low fat that. And when my dad, who was significantly overweight, said, look, I've been told I've got diabetes and I've got to start on this low fat diet. What do you think? I said, yeah, great, go for it. And it didn't make him better. He became fatter and sicker. But it didn't make me question it either. And it was really only when I started looking into it from a personal perspective that I realized so much of what I'd been taught was wrong. I mean, one of the best diets on the planet is the Mediterranean diet, which again, interestingly, Ansel Keys identified. If you look at the Mediterranean diet, it has plenty of olive oil, it has oily fish, it has nuts, it has legumes, it has, some red meat and the odd glass of red wine. And they actually did a proper randomized controlled trial. This was done funded by the Spanish government, so there was nobody dodgy involved. 5,000 people, big numbers, and they were randomly allocated to either Mediterranean diet, which was 40% fat, but good fat, and 20% protein, I think, and it was about 40% carbs, or the diet we've been told to eat, which is a low-fat diet. And they had to stop the study early because it was blindingly obvious that one group was so much healthier than the other group, and it was a lot who were on the Mediterranean diet, as I said, who have actually a relatively high-fat diet. And they had half the rate of diabetes, 30% less heart disease. The women who were on it, they were, I think, something like 50% less likely to have developed breast cancer, and it was good for the brain as well. So there have been study after study after study showing the benefits of the Mediterranean diet. But people's idea of what is a Mediterranean diet is still a bit odd. So the NHS, for example, in the UK recommends the Mediterranean diet, but when it describes the diet, it actually describes a low-fat diet. It does not describe the Mediterranean diet at all.
And this low-fat dogma is still deeply embedded in the psyche of institutions, it seems. I remember as an athlete in the early 90s, wedded to this idea that fat is bad, and the connection was welded into my brain that saturated fat causes heart disease. Now, is there any hard data to support that?
I think the most convincing data is around the benefits of the monounsaturated fat. So, for example, what you realize is that fats are really, really complicated.
Mm.
And the worst sort of fats are the artificial fats. And those are things like margarine and things that
Right.
used to have trans fats in. So again, it's back to the processed foods. So a
Mm.
lot of the stuff which we were sold as healthy, the margarines, are actually
Mm.
ultra processed, if you like. And they have, or certainly had, some pretty nasty stuff in them, particularly trans fats, which are really bad for the heart. The fats which we know are really good for you are the fats you find in things like yogurt, and particularly in olive oil, in nuts and things like that. And the fats which are kind of, if you like, more in the middle, I
Mm.
wouldn't say they're necessarily good for you, but they're probably not bad for you either, are things like butter and things like that.
Mm.
So I think, like most things, there are good fats, bad fats, there are good carbs, bad carbs, if you like. And I think the evidence is most compelling
Mm.
that if you can eat more olive oil based products,
Mm.
then that tends to be the sort of the healthier end of things. And certainly I'm perfectly happy to cook with coconut oil and coconut. I love coconut stuff. Super, it's a highly saturated fat, but I did a study with Oxford University in which we got people to either eat butter, olive oil, or coconut oil, a
Mm.
tablespoon of it every day. I think it was about 100 of them, randomly allocated,
Mm.
followed them for about 2 months, measured their sort of cholesterol levels, if you like. And it turned out the olive oil and the coconut oil had a similar sort of, if you like, beneficial effect on the heart, whereas butter was kind of neutral in this particular study. And the professor who I did it with was really, really surprised.
Mm.
We published it in the British Medical Journal,
Mm.
and it was seen as provocative but kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people, in India, a lot of traditional cuisines are based on coconut oil
Mm.
and coconut fat. So to sort of demonize
Ghee
it.
and tallow and these types of things.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think there was a Harvard academic who went to India and did not make himself popular by describing coconut oil as worse than poison. So
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it right now, tell me if you agree, is that the line dividing good and bad fat, you could say that generally speaking, good fats are the ones that come from nature. Like you squash and
yeah,
olive, you get olive oil, right? The coconut oil, things like that, avocados, right? But the bad fats are the ones that are artificially manufactured. Your canola oils, your safflower, sunflower, soybean oil, corn oil, vegetable oil. And again, we get back to what you discussed earlier about the body doesn't know what to do with these things. They're cheap to make, artificial, highly processed. And one of the great ironies is that industries seem to develop these as a reaction to questionable science that saturated fat is going to cause heart disease. Now, here we are decades later, and a lot of these artificially manufactured oils, because of their oxidative qualities, are causing the very thing that we were trying to avoid, especially the hydrogenation of margarine to
yeah.
make margarine that gives us trans fats, which is a carcinogen. It's just such a sad irony, this whole thing. Would you say that the greatest tragedy that nutritional science has ever taken decision-wise has been the false demonization of fat and how we've gotten fat so wrong?
I think it was there were lots of unintended consequences, including the fact that manufacturers then started stuffing everything with sugar because
Right.
once you have, unfortunately, low-fat products, they tend to taste terrible.
Yes.
So the only way you can make them taste better is by shoving in sugar. So a lot of products, particularly things like yogurt, I'm a big fan of Greek full-fat yogurt. Not huge
Yes.
amounts of it, but I do enjoy it. But
Mm.
once you strip out the fat, it really tastes pretty ghastly.
Yeah.
So that's when you stuff it with sugar and artificial flavors and things like that to make it palatable.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that just makes it much, much less healthy product. It turns it
Mm.
from being a nice natural, it's a processed food, but
Mm.
it turns it into an ultra processed food. So it's
Mm.
all the stuff that was done in the name of science, particularly in the 70s and early 80s.
Mm.
Yeah, it was kind of like taking a cigarette and deciding you could make it healthier by adding filters to it. You could
Mm.
probably make it a little bit healthier, but if you then start flogging a lot more cigarettes, then that's clearly not a good thing. So
Mm.
yeah, it was absolutely all part of a sort of a belief system
Mm.
which
Which
focused
pervades today.
it focused too much on one thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agreed. I mean, I do think, in a way, we are all singing from the same hymn sheet these days that most nutritionists, most health authorities would say eat a Mediterranean diet, try and eat less processed foods. But it's
Mm.
kind of how you achieve that,
Mm.
which is a struggle now that so many people are hooked on this lifestyle where it's super convenient just to buy this stuff. They're used to eating this stuff. They fed this stuff to their kids eat it as a treat because you pop into that's what a treat is. You go out and you eat junk food. And somehow we have to get back to a position like we did in cigarettes. Once upon a time, cigarettes were seen as a treat. You went on holiday, certainly in the UK,
Yeah.
you went abroad, you came back with cartons of cigarettes, you gave them to your friends because they were
Yes.
duty free. You would go to work and you'd hand out cigarettes. You would be regarded as completely insane if you did that now. But we do the same thing with sort of sweets, with junk food, with stuff like that. We bring in cakes and biscuits, and they're almost never homemade. They're made by some giant factory somewhere. You bring them into work. I mean, I was filming in an operating theatre recently where they were amputating the limbs of people. This was actually in Australia, the limbs of people with type 2 diabetes. This was a guy having his foot removed. And over to one side was a big pile of sort of biscuits and cake and things like that. And I'm thinking, this is so weird. On the one hand, you have the reason why this guy is lying on the table about to have his limbs removed because he's been living on a largely junk food diet for quite a long time. And here you have the medical staff, many of whom I'm afraid to say were significantly overweight, living also on this junk food because they're working long hours. It's super convenient. It's patients basically think the way to reward your doctor is to give them a big box of chocolates, whatever it may be. And this is the equivalent of once upon a time giving people cigarettes.
Yeah, the irony just shines like the sun, doesn't it? It's remarkable the way that we reward those closest to us in the whole world, our children, with sugar. We invite their friends over, and essentially we poison them. It's a sad reality. Yeah, I mean, how much you eat, of course, and not only that, but what you eat seem equally important in terms of sustained fat loss. A fascinating ongoing debate regarding fat loss between the calories in, calories out model and what could be called the carbohydrate insulin model, repopularized by Dr. Robert Lustig and science journalists Gary Taubes and Nina Teicholz. It seems yet unresolved. In other words, is obesity a disease of calorie imbalance or hormonal imbalance? They both seem important. Can you explain both positions and where you believe the truth lies? Because your book, The Fast 800, seems to take both into consideration.
Absolutely. So it's, in a sense, self-evidently true that the reason you put on weight is you are consuming more calories than you are burning off. That is obviously true, but then the question is, why are you doing that? Why are some people able to remain relatively slim throughout their lifetime, whereas a lot of us really struggle with it? And that's where the carbohydrate insulin model comes in. And what it says is that certainly some people, what happens is that their insulin levels respond, say, to a relatively high carbohydrate diet. What happens is they're eating all this sort of food, sugary foods, carb-rich foods. The pancreas pumps out insulin to bring those blood sugar levels down. It overcompensates. You get hungrier, so you eat more stuff. And then what happens over time is you become insulin insensitive, that your body no longer responds to the insulin signals. So your blood sugar levels start to rise and rise. Your body produces more and more insulin in a desperate attempt to bring those blood sugars down. And instead of the excess calories being stored somewhere where you can kind of burn them off, they get stored into inaccessible places. So I describe it as, you're driving your car, you pull into a petrol station, you fill up with petrol, but instead of putting petrol in the tank, you put it in the back seat. So you then get in the car and you realize, blimey, I haven't got enough petrol. And you're in this horrible cycle of feeling endlessly hungry. Sorry, there's a lot of noise going on behind me.
No problem.
By family making a noise there. And so you're kind of trapped in this cycle where you are endlessly hungry, endlessly feeding yourself. And that seems to be true for some people. So where I come to is that we are all different. There is some very powerful genetics in operation here, and that some people are super sensitive, if you like, or much more sensitive to carbs, to sugar and things like that than other people. So, for example, I would benefit and do benefit from a relatively low carb diet. My wife, who has been slim all her life, she's not bothered, although to be honest, she hasn't got a sweet tooth either. So I think that she maintains a healthy weight without having to think about it. She self-regulates. Whereas
Mm,
for me, I actually have to think about it, because if I actually listen to uh, my body would be saying to me, eat more cake, because
mm,
I love sweet things, and
yes.
it doesn't matter.
Mm,
Everything I know, everything which is going on up there. If there's a bar of chocolate and it's
mm,
11 o'clock at night and I know where the chocolate is, then I will go and eat it.
mm,
And that's kind of calling to me. So, as you
mm,
said, there are these two different models, one of which says it's all about the calories, and the
mm,
other model which says actually, no, a big part of it is about the food you eat.
mm,
And I think they are both true, but I also think this is a very useful model, because what it tells you is the quality of the food you eat matters hugely. And for some people in particular, people who develop type 2 diabetes, I think a relatively low carb or a low carb diet is beneficial. And the fact they develop diabetes suggests that they are more sensitive. Because not everyone who's overweight develops diabetes, but a significant number do. It's a very, very powerful predictor of whether you will. But you
mm,
can get people who are hugely overweight who don't have type 2 diabetes. You can get people who are normal BMI who do. And I think
mm.
that's probably to do with their sensitivity, if you like, to carbs and to sugar.
Yeah, I get overeating is always a problem, and talking about food quality as well. I mean, lack of satiation contributes to overeating, obviously. So having your belly full of breakfast cereal or being hormonally satiated by free-range eggs, avocado, they're two very different things. Could you talk about how to best satiate your hunger without overeating?
Sure. So again, it goes back to the sort of Mediterranean style diet, which is one where you do a lot of the cooking yourself, and where, for example, I have typically scrambled eggs with smoked salmon or something like that for breakfast, or I love an omelette in which I chuck in all the veggies from last night and things like that. And if I have either of those things, that keeps me perfectly full until lunchtime, when I kind of have soup and something else. Whereas if I
And why
had
is that? And why is that? Is it just because your blood sugar is stable? You haven't destabilized your blood sugar? Is that why you get that longer lasting satiety?
Sure, there are a number of factors. One is that eggs are quite high in protein, and we know that protein is satiating. We know that one of the big drivers of hunger is not having enough protein. And although people do say, that we get adequate amount of protein, a lot of it is poor quality. And we
Mm,
know, for example, the one reason why junk food is cheap is because it had very little good quality protein. By good quality protein, I do mean meat, fish, legumes, things like that.
mm,
And Poor quality protein means that your body is endlessly searching for it, because
mm,
protein is not something that your body stores. It doesn't really use it as fuel. It uses it much more to build the cells, the immune system, the red blood cells, things like that. So if
mm,
you haven't got enough adequate, good quality protein in your diet, then your body will go on looking for it, more and more and more of it. There's some really fascinating research on this carried out by Professor Simpson in Sydney, and he actually demonstrated, for example, in a locust swarm, slightly remote but kind of
mm,
interesting. He was looking at why locusts swarm. They're normally very solitary, but occasionally they go, these massive swarms across Africa.
mm,
And what he said is it's because the quality of the protein in the field where they're eating has dropped down. So they all swarm. And the reason they're swarming is they're looking to eat the locust in front of them.
mm.
And trying to avoid the locust behind them. They're being driven
Right.
by this protein
Fascinating.
need. And the
Mm,
closest source of protein in this case is another locust. So what
mm,
looks like a sentient thing is actually a mad drive for protein. And to
mm,
some extent, the same is true of humans. If we don't
mm,
get enough protein in our diet, particularly good quality, then we'll go looking for other stuff. And so the
mm,
problem, say, with breakfast cereal is it's got a lot of carbs in it. It hasn't got much in the way of good quality protein or fats.
mm,
And that means that you get this big blood sugar surge
mm,
afterwards. And if you wear a monitor or prick your finger, you can see that. And then you tend to get a crash as your body produces lots of insulin to bring it down.
mm,
And so you
mm,
might get a sort of crash around sort of a couple of hours later where your body overcompensates, the blood sugars come right down, and that triggers further hunger. And again, lots of good evidence. Professor Ludwig has done stuff like this. Lots of others have done it. So certainly from personal experience, I know this to be absolutely true.
mm,
And that's why, and again, fiber. I don't like eating the same thing every morning, so I have porridge some mornings, but I'll have it with nuts. I'll have it full fiber, preferably. But again, the sort of you the sort of porridge you buy in pots, which you just
mm,
add hot water to.
mm,
Frankly, they're just stuffed with sugar. They just will make your blood sugar soar, they're useless. You have to kind of go back to first principles. And people
Yes.
can't even be bothered to get some porridge, put it in the microwave or put it on the cooker.
Right.
They've got to the stage where they just want to open it, pour in hot water. Really, really,
Yes.
that's not
Yeah.
the way to go.
That's
So
right. Yeah. Not
it's
all oats are
really,
created equal. That's for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and what are some of the bad choices for breakfast that masquerade as healthy options? I mean, obviously breakfast cereal. If you walk down a breakfast cereal aisle, you can be forgiven for thinking you're in health food paradise. It's a
Yeah.
testament to brilliant advertising that essentially most of it is like having dessert for breakfast. It seems just garbage. Would you agree with that? Is that too harsh a statement?
No, I mean, no, it was good old Kellogg's brothers were the people who
Right.
came up with the breakfast cereal. And there was a big fight actually between the two brothers because one of them wanted to stuff it full of sugar because he said no one's going to buy it. And the other one said wanted to be purist about it. And they broke apart. And obviously the sugar
It's a very
brother
funny story that,
won.
yeah. Yeah.
The rest is history. And we have been sold this idea. The only thing I would say on behalf of the breakfast cereal companies is that they do put vitamins in it. And I was talking to a nutritionist and I said, why do you still encourage kids, particularly from deprived areas, to have breakfast cereal? And she said, because if they don't, they wouldn't get the vitamins. They're
Right.
not going to get it from their normal diet.
Mm,
And at least breakfast cereals and bread are fortified.
mm.
And that is a very sad indictment of the modern world, where the only way you're going to get your vitamins and minerals is from a company who's basically manufactured them in some factory in Germany or Switzerland and then stuffed them into a product which is mainly sugar. I mean, that's really,
Yes.
really sad, but that seems to be a
Yes.
fact of the modern world.
And what about the flip side of the coin? What are some excellent choices for breakfast that have an undeserved bad reputation? I think you've mentioned a couple already. Eggs,
Yeah,
the
no,
much maligned egg. It's strange to me. What a nature's powerhouse. You've got fat and protein all in one little element there. Anything else besides eggs that you think is worthy of mention here?
I think, as you said, avocados, things like that. I also am a fan of. I eat fish for breakfast, which is a more
Mhm.
Nordic sort of thing. I like kippers. I like kind of other things. Bacon, I used to be. I'm not so crazy about bacon these days. I still like it, but it's more a sort of ethical and environmental thing that I
Right.
am concerned about the carbon footprint of pork, and also, I do like pigs, and a lot of them are there are some happy pigs out there and there are a lot of unhappy pigs out there as
Mm,
well.
mm,
So I have tried to reduce my reliance on that sort of thing. But I do like fish. Fish is very sort of satiating and things like that. And as I said, apart from that, I probably ought to be exploring my breakfast options more. But and
mhm.
occasionally I also what else do I have? Salmon, as I said, smoked salmon for breakfast. That's pretty well it. Some
Mm,
variation of those
mm.
things.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
similar to
what are you
me.
fond of for breakfast.
What was that?
What do you like?
Oh yeah, you just basically listed everything that I would eat as
Yeah,
well. Yeah, I mean eggs are the staple, and omelets, things like that. A good quality bacon, and circling back to this idea of red meat. I mean, sweeping statements about the deleterious effects of red meat consumption, like we said before, it seemed misguided to me. I mean, nutritionally, beef from a confined, grain-fattened animal in a US feedlot is very different to beef from a
yes,
well-treated, pasture-raised cow in rural Queensland, right? So how does red meat fit into your nutritional approach?
sure. So I actually did a two-part documentary about this, looking at red meat and the science behind red meat and things like that. And broadly speaking, where I came down to is that red meat really isn't that bad. That depends on the amount you eat, and there seemed to be a kind of a U-shaped curve where an optimal amount was to be eating less than 100 grams a day. And
Mhm.
100 grams is kind of a piece of meat probably the size of your palm. So it's not a huge amount, but that's kind of per day.
Mm.
And if you eat more than that, there's kind of bad effects. 50 grams, again, is probably a figure to aim at. These
Mm.
days, I just don't, for environmental reasons, as I said, as much as anything else, because it's even when it is grass fed and things like that, it still has quite a significant environmental impact.
Mm.
So I do love a bit of steak. I do
Mm.
occasionally eat bacon. I do have the odd bit of pork. but I am trying to cut back. I become more of a sort of flexitarian, if you like. And
Yes.
what I'm trying to grow to love, not entirely yet there, but I'm getting there, is legumes. Because
Mm.
again, we know legumes, these are lentils, kidney beans, things like that. They're full of really good quality protein, and they have minimal environmental impact
Mm.
per sort of, calorie delivered.
Mm.
So my wife sneaks them into our diet as much as she
Mm.
can.
Yes.
Sneaks more sort of beans in and things like that. So if we're
Yes.
having a chili con carne, there will be a bit of mince down there, beef mince, but it'll be packed with other stuff as well. A lot
Yes.
more veggies, a lot more legumes, a lot more
Yes.
stuff like that.
Have you
And
found with legumes that for certain people, the phytates and the lectins can be upsetting to the gut? Yeah, my wife is like that. I'm fine with it, but have you found that's the case with some people?
yeah, no, absolutely. And all I can say is, like so many things, you've got to become your own self-experimenter. You've got to see
Yeah.
whether these work with you or they don't work with you. And some people really, really doesn't work, and it just upsets them.
Mm.
Because again, broadly speaking, I'm a huge fan of fiber. Try and get more fiber in your diet. Again, some people, it produces some explosive results. So
Mm.
you have to kind of. Sorry, that's my dog barking there in the background.
No problem.
So so you have to kind of uh, adjust it yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I guess just switching gears for a second, talk about the more psychological aspects of eating. So people eat for many reasons aside from hunger, right? Boredom, social obligation, to relieve stress. This emotional eating I've come across with so many clients over the years. Ironically, comfort food provides no long-term comfort. It's from the moment it slips over your tongue, it's all bad news. Why is this so common, this emotional eating, do you think? And do you have any tips for avoiding it?
Yeah, no, I mean, there are lots of complex reasons, but again, it comes back quite often to the advertising, the promotion that we have been taught as children to associate comfort with being given a chocolate bar or something like
Mm.
that. And there is no doubt that one of the impacts of eating sugar or sugary things and carbohydrate, like biscuits, cake,
Mm.
is it does make you feel better for a short period of time. Unfortunately, you do get this rise and the crash, and then you also feel guilty about it. So often comfort foods turns out to be very uncomfortable. There's a lot of really good research showing the negative impact on the brain of eating junk food. Professor Felice Jacka down in Melbourne has done a lot of really, really good work showing that when you can switch people over from a traditional Australian diet to a more Mediterranean style diet, even people who are severely anxious or depressed, a significant number are able to come off their medication, because they do see these profound changes which occur in the gut, but also in the brain.
Mm.
And she's also demonstrated that it's not enough to eat healthy, like 90% of the time. Even a modest amount of junk food can have a negative impact on your brain. So the
Mm.
connection between the gut, the brain, mood, what you eat is becoming clearer and clearer.
Mm.
And a lot of this research has actually been done in Australia, and psychiatrists and psychologists beginning to embrace it. But it's taken a very long time to do the proper clinical trials to convince the medical establishment there is really something in this. And it's
Mm.
kind of extraordinary because at some level we all know that what you eat impinges on your mood.
Mm.
But actually nailing it down scientifically,
Mm.
persuading doctors that this is true and that they should actually be recommending this sort of stuff for their patients. So I do think, as you were saying, winding back, comfort eating is the only ways round it, I find personally, is not to have the junk in the house. That if
Yes.
I have if I have chocolate or biscuits in the house and I'm feeling stressed, I've had bad news, got a deadline, I have missed the deadline, whatever it might be, I will reach for the packet of biscuits. If it's there, I will
Mm.
eat them.
Yes.
Despite absolutely everything I know,
Yeah.
and I will eat the whole packet. And I will feel better for about 10 minutes, and then I'll feel really, truly terrible and wonder why I did it. So my number one rule is just don't have it there, and your kids don't need it either. If
Mm.
really they don't.
Mm.
And unfortunately, my kids were all left home. My wife doesn't like this stuff anyway, so she's not bothered.
Mm.
But
Mm.
it's really tricky if you're in a household where there's a sweetie cupboard full of junk and you happen to be somebody who loves that stuff.
Yeah, if you've got a weakness for it and it's there, you're going to have it, and so it's best to keep it away. Yeah. I want to just switch gears for just a second, if I could, to a really touchy subject, and it's quite tragic in many cases. The idea of people who are trying to lose weight being sabotaged by those close to them. It's. Do you have any insights into this phenomenon? Numerous clients I've had over the years do so well, and they're have the rug pulled out from under them by those closest to them. It seems confounding to me. What are your thoughts about this?
No, absolutely. Interestingly enough, one of my sons, who's a doctor up in the north of England, he actually did a research project with Professor Roy Taylor, looking at people who had done the rapid weight loss diet for their diabetes. And then he interviewed people who had stuck to the diet and maintained weight loss and those who had not. And he said the recurring theme, which came up again and again, was did they have the support of their loved one? And he said the ones who had everyone encounters stress, bad times, illness, injury, loss of a job, something which is going to send them off track. But the thing which kept people on track was the support of the loved one. Now, I run a website, thefast800.com, where we have this online program, but we provide a community and support because we know how important that is, to have somebody who can kind of ring up a day or night or and say, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. But sadly, as you say, there are cases where the spouse sabotages it for reasons which are either they don't believe in it or there's been a change in the dynamic. It's not clear at all from Jack's research why it happens, but what he found unequivocally was that the people who had support, they were the ones who were going to be able to stick to it. And the people who were either on their own or were being sabotaged at home, they were the ones who fell off the bandwagon, if you like. Who has actually done, there's a kind of myth out there that all diets fail. Now, all bad diets fail, but I've looked at the success rate in good long-term studies, and what they find there is that is one of the common factors. The best predictors of whether you will maintain weight loss after you've lost it is the amount of weight you lose in the first 4 weeks of the diet. That's the single best predictor. But secondly, support from friends, families, colleagues, professional or otherwise. And the third thing is becoming more active. But you don't have to become much more active. It's the equivalent of walking, say, an extra 2 kilometers a day, something like that. It's not a huge amount, but you do need to become more active to maintain the weight loss. At least in part, I think, because of the impact that exercise has on the brain. But if you do all these things, then the success rate of diets, if you do a proper diet, actually very high.
Yes, there's another aspect that's kind of like in some ways related to this, and that is equally somber, and that is self-sabotage. I mean, the roots for this can be deeply buried in the psychology of the person involved. Can you offer any insight or advice to someone who does very, very, very well and then self-sabotages again and again?
Absolutely. I mean, some of it is conscious, some is unconscious, and some is sort of physiological responses of the body. So we know that you have this initial period when you're on the diet, you're losing weight, everyone's telling you you're looking great, you're feeling great, and then you kind of come to the end of it, or you plateau, because people always plateau. And the question is, how do you keep going? And what are your motivations? For me, I think it's important to know your motivations at the beginning and write them down. It shouldn't just be, I want to lose weight. It should be something much more specific. In my case, I measure my blood pressure, I measure my blood sugars on a weekly basis. I wear a tight belt, so I know when I've started to put weight on again. I know when my blood sugars have started to rise. I know when my blood pressure is going up. And for me, that provides motivation to go back. So self-regulation is hugely important. Can be standing on the scales, some measure of how and where you are. Also, you kind of got to say to yourself, I'm never going to put on more than 1 or 2 kilos, because once you start putting on weight, then you go into this pit of despair where you go, oh, I'm a failure. I'm always a failure. I might as well give up and eat loads of stuff.
Self-perpetuating, yes,
so
yes.
You get into that, try to avoid the apocalyptic your friends and say, reach out to communities who have done it and people who've been there, and to say, I'm feeling really bad about myself. I had a cake yesterday and, I didn't want to, but somehow I did it. And now I put on 1 kilo and what am I going to do? And just, they will talk you down from the ledge and they will say, look, fine, that happened. Get back on the, you'll gradually reduce again. It'll be fine, or do the rapid weight loss, whatever you want to do. It's not fatal. you begin to slip. And typically, the reason that people the reason why they fail is because they regard it as failure. Every slip up is seen as a failure, where you've got to forgive yourself, because to err is human, and we will go up and down over time with weight and things like that. You've got to forgive yourself.
And also willpower itself, it can be a powerful ally, but it's very misunderstood, and it's a limited commodity. Is it a genetic endowment, willpower? Can it be trained? And to what extent do you think we should use it and rely on it?
Yeah, no, willpower is grossly overrated. I was talking to a weight loss specialist the other day, and he was saying, look, we know that there is a strong component, a strong genetic component into why some people put on weight and why other people don't. He said you only need to look at dogs, Labradors and a Whippet. There is a reason why Labradors are fat, and the reason is because they have a particular gene, which means they are permanently hungry, and so they will do anything for food, which is also why they make such good pets. So they will do anything at all. They're amazingly trainable, whereas a Whippet will only kind of do what it wants to do. So he said, look, he's tall and skinny. He said, I'm a Whippet. He said, your wife Claire, she's a Whippet. We basically aren't that bothered. We self-regulate. Our weight doesn't go up and down or fluctuate. And that is probably genetics. Claire's family are all skinny, whereas my family are all a bit fat. Not all of us, but certainly my father, we all go that way. And for us, essentially, it's not so much willpower, it's the things we like to eat. And we're very poor at self-regulating. And so given half a chance, I'd be scoffing the ice cream and doing things like that in a way that Claire just regards as completely weird and abnormal. That if I'm going past a bit of cake, even if I'm not even remotely hungry, my hand will just kind of reach out and grab it and stuff it in my face. My wife says, watching me, it's almost as though I'm trying to pretend I'm not actually doing it. I'm almost looking away and reaching for it. And
it's unconscious, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, oftentimes I find that, sorry, go ahead.
So you have to basically create environments in which it is easier to be good. So,
right, that's right, and I guess now, I mean, you're talking about habit formation is the most important thing, and is a correlation between willpower and habit formation. It's almost like unfit people look to fit people and they think, oh, they must have so much willpower, but in reality, fit, healthy people rarely need willpower because they've developed good habits. Habits seem inversely related to the need for willpower. Habit removes the need to use it.
There's evidence that people who love exercise, they're the ones who actually also get the endocannabinoid rush. They basically, they enjoy it. They actually love going for a run and walk. This is probably not true for most people. And so you have to find ways of making it more enjoyable by, going and finding a personal trainer who you like and who makes you laugh and will keep you on track, or doing exercise with a friend or something like that, so you feel you're letting them down if you don't turn up, or joining a Zumba class or something like that. The worst thing you can do is find a form of exercise which you hate, and which put away on the treadmill or whatever. You're hating it, but you're thinking this is good for me. You will give up because after a period of time you're getting no pleasure from it, and humans need pleasure to keep going. So it is very much about habits, are about in training your brain so it becomes attached almost to something you're already doing. So, for example, I do squats and press-ups first thing in the morning. When I get out of bed, I do them. My wife does them. We say to each other, do them. Because I know if I don't do them then, I never will do them. Because that's what I do. So for me, the action of getting out of bed is associated with doing the press-ups and the squats.
Yeah, it's like a Pavlovian response almost. It's a conditioned response. Yeah.
Response. Otherwise, you always find excuses not to do them because the day will trundle on. You think, oh, I must do some press-ups. Oh, I'll do them later. I'll do them after supper. I'll do them. I'm a bit busy now. So it's about making conditions. So these things which may not be instinctive to you and which you may not enjoy necessarily, becoming trained, if you like. And that's the way you establish good habits. And as I said, it's about making sure that it's easier to be good than bad. People, who are strong-willed, mainly it's about the fact that they're not actually tempted by the other stuff for whatever reasons. It could be genetics, it could be background, it could be a whole host of reasons. My wife, as I said, has no interest in sweet things. She is not tempted remotely by biscuits, chocolate, or cake. You can plonk them in front of her. She doesn't care. She has a savory tooth. Always had a savory tooth. My kids are the same. I suspect they've inherited it from her. They're all kind of tall and slim, like their side of the family. Which I'm grateful for.
Yes.
But it does mean I can empathize with people
Mm.
who do struggle, because I
Mhm.
struggle and it is a continuous struggle. I
Yes,
know
yes.
I am never ever, it's a lot of habits never go away. I'm
Mm.
never ever going to be able to say goodbye to chocolate forever. But
Right.
equally,
You just have to manage it. Mhm.
I've just got to manage it and make sure the opportunities are more limited.
Yes. Dr. Mosley, I am mindful of your time, and we're coming up to almost an hour right now, but I did want to circle back before we do finish to something you're talking about, fasting. This is very, very crucial. And I mean, regarding fasting, there's so many different protocols, and you touched on this before. I've successfully used what I call compressed window eating. You refer to it as TRE, time restricted eating. Can you talk just a little bit about the various forms of fasting and why you did settle on the 5-2? I know you touched on this before, and how that morphed into what you call the Fast 800. I mean, fasting has been intertwined with human relationships with food for thousands of generations across all cultures and religions. Perhaps we might even say that the scarcity of food has been a contributing factor in the evolution of our hormonal makeup.
Absolutely.
Um, why do you think it is that fasting is viewed with so much suspicion in modern times as well?
Sure. So I actually started off by in the film by doing a 5-day fast, a water only fast, and it was tough. I didn't feel great on it. I'm not convinced it's terribly healthy, because you do need protein every day. You need 50, 60, 70 grams of protein every day. Otherwise, your body will start looking at your muscles. So
Mm,
water only fast, not crazy about. I tried
mm,
alternate day fasting and I just found it inconvenient. And so I
mm,
settled on 5-2 because there was some science behind it, and because
mm,
I personally found it quite easy to do, cutting my calories 2 days a week. Originally, I said 600 calories a day because that was based on animal studies. These days, I say 800 calories because it's more achievable, but you still
mm,
get the beneficial effects. I
mm,
also looked into time restricted eating. At that time, again, it was mainly animal studies based on the work of Professor Sachin Panda
mhm.
in the
That's your
US
bad
and
news.
California.
Mm,
So, what he has settled on now, and the basis of all his studies, are 14-10.
mm,
Essentially, you have a 14-hour overnight fast and you eat within a 10-hour window. He actually thinks the benefits come largely from eating earlier rather than later in the day. So he stops eating about 7 p.m. and doesn't eat again until around sort of 9 a.m. The next morning. And there is some
Yeah, I wouldn't
evidence.
even consider that really a fast. Really,
No,
it's very simple to do.
uh,
Anyone can do that.
exactly, but most people eat around the clock, and so
Yes.
they have a late night snack just
Mm,
before they go to bed, and then they eat first thing in the morning. So
mm,
most people do not actually even spend 12 hours without food in their system. So
mm,
time restricted eating has become super fashionable, particularly in California, and
mhm,
Professor Panda has done a lot of really interesting research. So what I do is I combine the two. So with the Fast 800, the approach is to start with rapid weight loss if you're suitable. It's not suitable for everyone. On the website fast800.com, we detail who it's suitable for and who it isn't. But you
mm,
start off with rapid weight loss because, as I said, the amount of weight you lose in the first 4 weeks of a diet is one of the best predictors. It's
mm,
a broadly low carbohydrate, sort of keto-ish diet.
mm,
Uh,
mm,
that leads to rapid weight loss of the order of 1 to 2 kilos a week.
mm,
And then you transition from that into the 5-2 pattern when you
mm,
feel it's the right moment to do so, where you're eating a Mediterranean style diet 5 days a week and eating 800 to 1,000 calories 2 days a week. And then to what I call the way of life, which is essentially a Mediterranean style diet, where you're
mm,
minimizing the junk food and you're eating, healthy, non-processed foods.
mm,
And the reason I have this journey, if like, is that I think it's important while you are doing it to acquire a taste for doing your own cooking. My wife Claire, who's a doctor, she does all the recipes which she tests on her patients and also on the family, and they're all based broadly around a healthy Mediterranean style diet, for all the reasons which we know, super healthy. But you also, the French have a saying that hunger is the best sauce.
mm,
And so, what will happen if you start to eat these foods when you're hungry, even if you hated legumes, you hated vegetables to begin with, by the time that's what you're eating, you'll find your body gets kind of, I actually like that.
mhm,
It satisfies me. My hunger drops off. And again, what is surprising is the studies find that hunger drops off surprisingly rapidly, even on an 800 to 1,000 calorie a day diet.
mm,
And there have been a large number of randomized controlled trials showing this is a very good way to lose weight and improve things like blood pressure, not just for people who are type 2 diabetics, but people who have obesity or who are significantly overweight. So
And
this is
plus, I think that if for those of us who are over 50, not only weight loss, but fasting is said to trigger autophagy as well. Have you looked much at this? So this is very fascinating to me.
Absolutely. So essentially what happens is that after a period, and it takes 12 to 14 hours without food in your system, your body switches on this cellular repair mechanism called autophagy or autophagy, where it starts to clear out the junk cells. So aging and the diseases associated with aging largely are around the accumulation of junk. It's a bit like having, your house full of junk and you stick in more and more stuff. But what happens after about 12 to 14 hours, your body goes, okay, there's no food, so we're not going to be building new cells. Instead, we're just going to get rid of the junk. We're going to clear it out. And that makes space, if you like, for new, fresh cells. And
like a cellular house cleaner.
one of the benefits of having a longer period without food is it does this cellular repair, if you like. And the studies are pretty convincing around that.
Oh, fascinating. I guess just to wrap up, talking about nutritional philosophy, the philosopher Bertrand Russell once said, "I would never die for my beliefs because I might be wrong." And I thought that's a rather pithy way of talking about the fact that, we have to move with the times. And when new information comes forward, we change our views in concordance with it. How has your thinking changed about nutrition over the years? And again, can you just briefly plot for us the evolution of your thinking about what constitutes a good diet and that's led right up to this book, The Fast 800?
I'm sure. So one of the first things was realizing that the low-fat diet really wasn't the way to go, that a diet with healthy fats and decent amounts of good quality protein is much healthier and more satisfying. Legumes, which I said, lentils, things like that, which I really hadn't touched. I moved into, these days I eat much less white rice or even brown rice, but much more in the way of lentils and things like that. I realized that if you're going to lose weight, and you need to lose significant amounts of weight like I did back in 2012, then you're going to have to do something a bit drastic, but simply minor modifications to your diet, unlikely to do it. And that led me into the benefits of rapid weight loss. And that in turn led me to the kind of Fast 800. On top of that, also, I obviously include exercise, the joys of high intensity training, which is another story entirely, but that was based around, again, another science documentary I made back in 2012, showing that short bursts of intense exercise can be hugely beneficial, more so in some ways than longer, slower, plodding stuff. So if you're going out and go out for a walk, go brisk, go more than 100 paces a minute, don't just meander, push yourself a bit. And also the role of breathing for managing anxiety and helping you sleep. So all of these things have kind of evolved over time, and I brought them, incorporated them all together into the Fast 800 approach. So it's a multi-dimensional approach, if you like, based initially around rapid weight loss, but also incorporating intermittent fasting, but at its heart, having the sort of Mediterranean style diet.
Wonderful, wonderful. I guess just to finish up now, for any viewer watching now who feels attaining a healthy weight to be a hopeless cause, can you offer a final message of hope for such people?
Absolutely. It completely does work. I mean, this has been the subject of numerous randomized controlled trials, and people are able to lose weight and keep it off in the long term following this approach. So we know from the studies, as I said, from the one carried out by Professor Roy Taylor, people lost an average of 10 kilos. And even after 3 years, they were still 7 kilos down. And that is life-changing. Even if you lose 3 kilos, that can have significant benefits for your health. It will improve your sleep. It will improve your risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and things like that. So even quite modest weight loss can have a big, big, big change to your life. So do it now. It's absolutely worth it because you have, most of us have a lot of years to live, and we want those years to be healthy.
Wonderful. So the book is called The Fast 800. You'll find links to purchase on the screen now. Dr. Mosley, it's been a pleasure to talk with you, sir. So on behalf of the members of Tribe Social Fitness and readership of the Carousel, may I offer our sincere gratitude for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.